So today is a huge day in Ukraine because yesterday we saw the largest anti-government protest since the start of the full-scale invasion in Kyiv. A lot of people turned up, including the mayor of Kyiv. And as someone that actually met Zelensky, spent time with him multiple times this year, I wanted to offer my insight and explain what's actually going on. And that's really important right now because there's so many people misconstruing this, and there's so many people in the MAGA world as well, and in the Kremlin, who are lying about this. So Rada, which is the parliament in this country, have passed a bill that basically means two anti-government bodies that are independent, anti-corruption bodies, I should say, that are independent, have now been brought under the umbrella of the prosecutor's office. And it's basically about centralizing power. It's two of these independent organizations that are now basically answering to the prosecutor general, right? And 90% of Ukrainians' parliament voted for this, and late last night Zelensky signed that bill. And if you read that immediately, whether you're Ukrainian or otherwise, it sounds outrageous. It sounds like the government are trying to cover up something. It sounds like they're trying to censor anti-corruption bodies. But this is part of a much bigger picture. And to understand that, we have to go back about 30 years at the start of Ukrainian independence. This country was colonized by the Soviet Union for decades, and one of the rots that brought was corruption. Russia is a mafia state at its core, at every single level, especially at a government level. And that infected every corner of this country. And so when Ukraine gained independence back in the 90s, that didn't go away. It takes a very long time to eradicate things like corruption. South Africa gained its independence around the same time as Ukraine, and the ANC is still struggling with issues and corruption, and they're dealing with it very slowly. And that's something that Zelensky has been trying to do gradually throughout his presidency, is to fire people, make layoffs, people that were involved in corruption, people that had that Soviet mindset. But it takes a long time. And I'm not a shill for Zelensky, right? I'm not paid to say any of this. I'm a completely independent reporter. But that's basically what's been passed. Is it perfect? No. Do we understand the full extent of what those two now government bodies, these anti-corruption bodies, were doing? No. But there's also a massive amount of corruption that still exists now from that Soviet era. And it could very well be that those government bodies, anti-corruption bodies, were only investigating the type of corruption that they felt like investigating. Again, Zelensky is surrounded by people that don't like him and want him out, and he is also surrounded by corrupt people and Soviet-minded people and Russian-sympathetic people. This is something I've been talking about for a long time. It's something I've heard with people in government here, and it's also something that Zelensky's talked about as well. But one thing is really important, and that's that a protest took place yesterday in the middle of Kyiv without a single hitch, without anyone firing on them, without anyone basically criticizing them. The police let it happen, and that was democracy. And Ukraine is constantly criticized by the far right in America, by tankies as well, by Russians, for being a dictatorship. A protest doesn't happen in the capital of your country randomly if you have a dictatorship. And many members of the government were retweeting images from that protest. Zelensky responded to it as well. And that is a 101 indication that this is basically still a free democratic country. And that's what the main focus should be on this, because if you scroll through your timeline, you'll see Charlie Kirk and Marjorie Taylor Greene saying the Kiev regime are now completely sick of corrupt Zelensky, Ukraine is corrupt, and repeating the Kremlin lines. These, by the way, are the same people that helped get Trump elected. Trump, who is probably the most corrupt president in US history. Trump, who this year, since getting inaugurated, and it's only been 7 months, did a shady deal so that they could give him a $380 million jet as a return for his investment with governments. Trump, who also has shady investments in Moscow and all across America. This is the person who they've championed, who have decided that Zelensky is the person that's corrupt. So the people that are throwing stones the most right now are the people in glass houses, and it's something that is so galling and so ridiculous. But again, I'm not a shill for Zelensky. I'm an independent reporter in this country. And that also hammers on the point. The fact that I arrived here completely independently and was allowed to sit directly opposite Zelensky, ask him anything I wanted, no pre-scripted questions, shows this country has freedom of press. And actually, if you look at the Freedom of Press Index, which is released every single year, Reporters Without Borders release this, Ukraine has been slowly rising in that. And if you are genuinely concerned about corruption, then look at Russia. The country that, by the way, Marjorie Taylor Greene and people like Charlie Kirk love so much. A country which would fire on protesters if they gathered in anywhere near the Kremlin or in Moscow in the last 24 hours, would have jailed them and imprisoned them. If you want to look at corruption, look at the source, which is literally Russia. Again, things are really complicated right now. We don't know what happened behind those closed doors, but the main focus is that that protest could take place without a hitch, and this country allows it. This basically happened in 2014 as well, right? In Maidan. Maidan happened because Ukrainians were sick of corruption and they were sick of Russian influence. Ukrainians looked west to democracy, to America, to Western Europe, to join the EU, to join NATO, while their president looked east to Moscow, which is why he fled to Moscow. And Ukrainians don't tolerate that. So when people saw breaking news on their news feeds that Zelensky had shut down these two government bodies, they were upset about it. And they are perfectly within the right to. This is internal Ukrainian politics. But as outsiders and as Americans or people from the UK or anywhere else watching this, the most important thing is a protest took place in a country during wartime that is supposedly corrupt. And that's the most ridiculous part of all this and the most hypocritical part for the people criticizing this. And again, the rot of corruption goes deep inside this country. And it goes deep inside a lot of different countries. We had the PPE scandal with the Tories in Britain, right? We had scandals all across the board with the Labour Party. This is a typical part of democracy. Societies have levels of corruption, but this country is one of the only countries in the Western world that's actively dealing with that. And that's why Zelensky has been firing and laying people off that have a history and a dodgy track record. Honestly, this is my honest opinion with it. We'll probably find out in a couple of weeks' time exactly what happened behind those closed doors, what kind of conversations led to this happening, and what those government bodies were apparently investigating, and who was behind it. But the focus right now should be on that protest and should just be the pressure that the president is under. He's trying to hold off the Russian army, the North Korean army, armed with Iranian weapons and Chinese parts, and also rid his country of corruption. So this is the most important part of all of it. And I'm currently on the road right now in the Donbas, so I'm doing this as part of making a documentary. This was just something I really wanted to respond to because it's blowing up all over the place, and there's been so many awful actors amplifying misinformation about it. So when you see that on your feed, just keep on scrolling. Again, these are the people that got someone elected that is gifted a $380 million jet. They have absolutely no idea what they're talking about. But yeah, I'm going to be bringing on-the-ground reports here. I've been filming yesterday with units, and we're currently on the way through the Donbas. So I'll keep you updated, I'll keep posting, but I just thought I would give you my opinion of this as someone that spent time with Zelensky in the last few months. Thanks for watching.